Hi everyone, I'm Jess.
Hi guys, I'm Tom.
Welcome to the Fast Track by Fastlane, where technology, innovation, and learning come together. It feels like every week there is a new AI tool, a new technology, another big announcement that's changing the way we work, right?
Every week, you mean almost every day. Yeah, and it's been like that for quite some time now, since practically November 2022, when ChatGPT got launched and actually won all of our hearts. It hasn't stopped yet.
Absolutely. Things are moving incredibly fast, and honestly, it's hard to keep up.
Definitely. I mean, technology itself in the world of IT, I've been here for 20 plus years. So technology itself always had its own moments, cycles as those things were happening from the point where we actually got the internet, then we got the cloud and everybody was going into the cloud. And it was always kind of changing the way that the IT people are actually doing the IT. To somewhat extent, they changed the way that office workers or typical end users do their work, but it has never happened up until now that so much change is influencing absolutely everybody's life. Everybody's using AI now, and there's no coming back. That's just how it's going to be. And I think that that's why there's so many investment into a whole different set of technologies out there that are given for different kinds of use cases that we can only imagine that what's going to happen in the next couple of months, let alone talk
Months,
about
weeks.
years.
And a good thing about Fastlane too is that for years, we've been helping organizations to build the skills they need to keep up with this word. So AI, cloud, cybersecurity, data, or networking, it all comes back to helping people learn and grow.
Definitely. I mean, Fastlane is the biggest educator out there. So it's partnering with top companies from Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Anthropic, Cisco, Palo Alto. No matter which vendor you actually mentioned, which is really strong nowadays, it's going to be something that we do. It's going to be something that we teach, and we help people how to overcome their business problems with the technology. That's kind of in the root of what we do every single day.
Absolutely. And well, in this first episode, we're starting with the topic that's getting a lot of attention right now is the agentic
Definitely.
enterprise. What do you have to talk about
Definitely.
it?
Agentic is the topic that has been with us now. I think it's going to be a year and a half. Technically speaking, the whole AI, I mean, the buzz started with ChatGPT. So again, that famous November 2022. AI is actually quite an old term, to be honest. I don't know if you
Yes.
knew this, but it's an older term than the term computer science. So term computer science was actually coined sometimes during the middle 80s, where we got personal computers, and AI has been used since middle 60s or late 60s. Even though that AI and affect how people around that famous group that started to design computers and everything else around Alan Turing and other pioneers in the IT industry, they didn't think of AI as we think nowadays. They thought about some kind of machine that's going to have a spirit, talk with the humans or something like that. It took us a while to get to something that can even produce human language, but now we have it. So basically, since the last couple of years, usually people take ChatGPT as the moment. I would go a little bit before that because there were already some tools that could write poetry or recognize the poetry. There were some tools that could generate images, that could recognize things in images. I would find that like 2019, 2020, that's the first time AI actually started to go and get into our lives more and more with Siri, for example, even back then. That was like 2016 or something like that, those personal assistants. But definitely, since 2022, we are in this AI world as we know it currently. Then at some point, it was like late 2023, early, that we got these models that actually were able to understand the concept. I am either asking you a question or I'm asking you to use some tool to go outside of what you usually do and search the web or send an email or call some other function. So that was the function calling that was implemented in the models. The second thing was during the middle 2024, where we got the reasoning capabilities. So models started to think, you started to see those thoughts of the model that were happening there. And then somebody in NVIDIA published a paper late 2024, early 2025, starting to call those generative AI apps that we were using, renaming them and started to call them agents. And that's how the whole agentic enterprise or agentic AI world was actually born, where we started to have these components who are actually built of LLMs large language models like GPT in ChatGPT. And we're integrating the prompts, the natural language prompts, giving it set of instructions, some kind of tool like access the web, access the email, access my documents, and a reasoning capability so that it can plan the structure and then execute on that particular plan. So the first agents were just like, using the ChatGPT just a little bit smarter. It was first planning and then answering your questions. And we've come now to the multi-agent systems where practically enterprises are being reimagined by kind of creating a tons of, or hundreds, or first dozens, then probably now hundreds of different agents, which are either replacing certain part of the process or augmenting certain part of the process and helping us all do work better, cheaper, faster, depending on what you're trying to achieve.
That's, whoa, mind blowing, right? And one thing that I really want the people to understand is like, if you're not, like, let's say someone that's not an engineer, right? Could you give us a real simple example for the real world?
I kind of think that, end users are nowadays, all of them are trying to figure out what an agent is. And I gave you some kind of definition, which is published by that paper. So we are always thinking about those components that have some kind of generative AI element into it. But we can talk really about simple things. If you're going to be using, let's say, Claude is a really popular tool out there, and you create a skill in your Claude that's going to access some of your data that's inside of your laptop. For example, you have a couple of documents, and then Claude, for example, summarizes 3 different documents, creates an Excel sheet with the topics, the most common topics of the document. That would already be considered to somewhat extent an agent, because it has tools to access your documents, it has tools to generate an Excel file, there's a script, there's a skill, that's a set of instructions. So we can consider those being agents. If you're using something like you're probably going to be using Gemini at some point, that's a Google's tool, and you take a gem. Gem is kind of this little thing where you put in a prompt, like instruction set, like you are my writing assistant, this is my style of writing, and attach 3 examples of your most recent written articles that are published, I don't know, in some magazine or whatever. You attach those examples there, you describe how you would like it to write, and then you switch it on and then say, okay, write me a 3-paragraph article on this particular topic, these are my notes. And then it suddenly starts writing in your style. So that would again be considering an agent, because it has an input, it has a tool to write, it can understand the context. Those are some of the capabilities of an agent. A situation in which I create an agent that's going to look in my inbox every single morning and create me a summary, because I work in multiple time zones. So some of the work is actually happening while I'm asleep. So I want to have a recap, what was happening while I was actually sleeping. So every time at 9 a.m., my agent kicks in, looks at my inbox, figures out all the emails that have arrived, prioritizes them, and actually presents me to the summary and tells me, these are the 2 ones that you need to look immediately. The rest can wait till the end of the day. So that can be an example of an agent. Or the one that's going to automatically send people my availability. For example, if there is an email coming into my inbox and people are asking to meet with me at a certain point in time, it can automatically go into my calendar. That's the first tool it's going to use. So it's triggered by an email. It's using the tool called Calendar, fetching my availability, picking up the top 3 choices and sending that back in an email. Please choose one of these 3. And then maybe somebody replies, my agent is already waiting, figures out, oh, they chose this, and I can immediately send back a meeting invite, which is going to contain Teams call, Zoom call, Google Meets call, whatever we are using for it. So those could be things that can easily be created. You don't need to code any of the examples that I actually shared. There are tools that are doing so. So now it will depend on your ecosystem. Are you using Microsoft, Google, some of the other ones? But all of them can actually create these kind of experiences.
So one of the big concerns that people have is about trust. So how can an organization trust with AI making decisions nowadays?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I've given you an example which is probably not that much. You probably don't not need to involve that much trust into it. If you keep your calendar up to date, an agent is automatically going to offer something from your calendar, it's probably not that big of a deal. If your calendar is up to date, it's completely fine to schedule a meeting at the time that you're available. Probably it's okay. However, will you let your agent answer every single email that comes in? Well, that's something that you're going to do. Are you, so for example, if you're an engineer, inside emails are probably okay to be automatically replied by the agent. Not big harm can be done. But what if you're a salesperson and there's a customer inquiry coming in? Are you going to let your agent automatically reply? Or will you let it create a draft in your draft folder? You're going to look it up and then click send. Probably going to go in that direction because you don't want any mistakes in customer communication. On the other hand, if you're a customer support assistant, so there's like 10 of you, and now we wish to give you an agent that's going to help you, then we're going to actually define how many mistakes do customer engineers or customer support agents actually make. Is it 5%? Is it 10%? So 10% of the emails by human beings are answered wrongly. That means if we can get an agent that in average is better than those 10%, then we can actually let the agent do that job because human beings are making more mistakes than the agent would. But if it's the other way around, for example, if we are trying to build an agent that's going to recommend do some triage with the patients, well, that's probably not what you want to do. You want to have a human in the loop. That's the concept that we are introducing now. Human in the loop actually means agent does some things, but there is a human being who needs to approve the next step so that the agent can continue. So that's basically what we are combining. If it's some low risk, we can easily let the agent do that. If it's a higher risk, we introduce human in the loop, and actually the human set of eyes double checks what agent did, and then we can approve and continue with the process. So technically speaking, this is my idea of viewing the trust of agentic AI. What kind of tools are you going to allow that agent to use? That's going to be another important part of the trust. So you should start small, just like with anything else where we are building the trust. Just like we were building the trust with cloud computing, for example. You wouldn't go immediately and put your enterprise banking, core banking system into the cloud. I think that nowadays, not many of them are actually migrated to the cloud, partially because they have been built using COBOL and some of the other technology from late 70s, but partially also because that's the core of your bank. You're not going to start in the core. You're going to start with maybe bank's website. Not even the banking application, not even the mobile banking or something like that, but the bank's website. So that's something that's not that crucial. We obviously every bank needs to have a website, but there's not that many interactions. There's nothing proprietary there. There's no customer information on the website. You can feel free to move it to the cloud. That's the same approach that we will need to do with the agentic AI. We shouldn't start with a core system. We should start with something that's a side. You probably the best experience for any kind of enterprise that's building the customer-facing agents would be to build some helpful assistant on their website. Again, start with something simple. Some agent that can answer FAQ questions. Some agents that can collect some information and then forward the request to the actual person who is going to answer it. So you can start with some small wins. Inside of the organization, you can actually have a policy assistant. We have a ton of policies all across different enterprises that we work at. So those policies are documents that probably nobody reads. And we should all do it because those are either policies or bylaws that impact the way that we work. And they are important, but nobody reads them because they are tedious reading material. That's how it is. So that's if we create an agent that can just be based on those policies and quickly answer the questions about, what are the rules of going to vacation? I'm just a newbie here. I just joined. How many vacation days I have? That probably information I have, but what do I need to do before? Do I need to ask manager approval or HR approval? Or, I bought something that I need for work. Did I need to have a manager approval? How do I reimburse it? Can I reimburse it? What if I'm working from home? So those are certain things that everybody has questions about, and everybody's always pointed to, oh, here's the policy, read it through. It can be better than that. It can be an agent that can easily just answer our questions. And it's a low-hanging fruit. It's not something that's complex to build, and it's not some trust that you need to build so that something will go wrong. And then that's going to be our sandbox environment. Then we move on. Then we attach different tools. Then we try this, try that. A lot of the people I talk with are saying, okay, we can give access to anything to our internal agent as long as it's read-only access. And that's cool. Agent cannot change anything, cannot delete anything. It can just read. So that's also a way you're building the trust that your security is in place, because it's much more important than ever that all of your cybersecurity policies are in place. because you are no longer just protecting yourself against attackers or against mistakes by your employees. You are protecting yourselves by potential mistakes that agent can make. So that's a
Yes.
whole different set of problems that might come up.
That is really, really important to say. Cybersecurity is always a topic when it comes to AI, right? One thing that I want to ask you is that like you work with many organizations. We work with many organizations every day. And what kinds of questions are the customers asking every day about AI? The most experienced ones and the very, I would say, naive ones.
I mean, it's a fascinating time. So what customers are asking at the end of the day begins with basically the distinction is between whether or not that's the question coming from an engineer or it's coming from an end user. Because we cannot forget that the situation that we are now at, we are back in the IT world, we are teaching end users how to use new tools. AI for them is a new tool in the workplace. We weren't there for more than 30 years. That's the time when the computers actually came to the workplace. So 1992, 1995, when we needed to teach people how to open up, Word or Excel or internet browsing. So maybe till 2000s, we were dealing with the end users. But I think that even us educators are learning quite a lot now how to approach this topic, because end users are not going to ask, they might not even ask how safe is this. Some of them are aware of that. But they're going to ask, I have these documents. I just want to summarize them. They're not going to even care about where those documents reside. I just want a summary of my document. That's my work. So the question is, usually, if it's coming from the end user perspective, it's coming, how can I do more with this? How can I implement that in my workplace? You wouldn't believe how many end users are already there while their organizations are not, where all the things, all the policies and all the different kind of AI usage workbooks are not in place, and employees are already using AI. Nowadays, everybody's using AI. I haven't started a single class, neither end user or especially not engineering class, where I could ask a question, are you using AI? Everybody's using AI. It's just the question whether or not it's in compliance with what your organization wants. So sometimes people are going to ask about, okay, when can I use this at my workplace? Or can I use this at my workplace? So people are interested in doing more and more. And another question that I usually get from the end user is, they think of the AI as a tool, but they also think of the AI as magic. They see some video, they see something out there, and it's like suddenly everything is going to be possible. Without even our intervention, those documents are generated. They're perfectly clear. They're perfectly fine. We can just send them out, and there's nothing for us to do so. So I think that we're still in the period where we're gonna see so many AI-driven mistakes, so many documents that were full of hallucinations. Because that's another question that people ask: how can I make it sure? How can I make it not produce those hallucinations? How can I write my prompt so that I get exactly what I want? And the answer is you don't, because you cannot. This is a non-deterministic technology that each time you send a prompt, you're going to get a slightly different result. So there's no way to be absolutely sure that AI generated a completely truthful content other than if you read the document yourself. So people would like to know how to write those prompts, but there are no perfect prompts. There are just good prompts that give you 80% of the thing or 90% of the thing, but 10 to 20% is always going to be up to you to read it. From the engineering perspective, people are always asking, is this going to replace us? That's one thing, if you talk to the developers. And that's really a big question we can actually address separately, so I'm not going to mental into that. But the second thing is, all right, how secure is this? How do we secure the AI? How do we define the governance policies? So that's what some of the more architectural topics that are coming in on every single time we are teaching something about AI, because I don't think that it's yet clear, no matter which vendor we choose, whether it's Google, Microsoft, Amazon, or some of the other ones, that I don't think that they are there yet in terms of the absolute strategy, how this whole thing would work. And I'm not going to go into technical details here, but there are so many things that we don't, but I mean, I don't think we don't know them. We know them, but we are yet to agree inside of the industry, for example, how agents are going to get authenticated. We know how users are authenticating. You and I have username, password, maybe multi-factor authentication, and we are into the system. But how are agents going to authenticate? Are they going to take us as users, so we are authenticating into the system? or are agents going to be authenticated and then somehow control the access? It's still not clear. There are different approaches out there, and that's what engineers are always asking. Okay, you show them the first demo of an agent that they develop, and then the second question is, okay, Tomislav, but this is accessing your inbox. How? How is it controlled? And I can show them in a situations, but there are also some tools that do not support that kind of access yet. So we are living in the world where we understand what we want to get. We understand to somewhat extent how we are going to get there, but we are not there yet with many, many tools there that yet need to be, I would say, transformed in a way that they can become part of this agentic world.
Yeah, it's happening and developing while we're using it, right? And, if we could give an advice for these organizations that don't know where to start, what would be the first step?
I love this sandbox approach, and but the sandbox is a different term for absolutely different organizations. So first of all, we need to assume, just like, it's kind of like the strategy of implementing AI is really close to the strategy how you would implement zero trust in cybersecurity world. So in that, there is a zero trust is something that says assume breach, assume that you're hacked. Just like that, I would advise every organization to assume that everybody's using AI already. So don't think like nobody's using AI in my environment. No, trust me, people are. They are using that on their phones. They're using that if you even blocked all the access to ChatGPT and other flavors, they're still having their phones or they're having their personal laptops. They'll find a way to utilize AI. The problem is that if you are not controlling that, then your data is going to leak no matter what, because they are going to be using free tools, and free tools don't have one important clause in the agreement. And that clause says that Google, Microsoft, Anthropic, OpenAI, whoever, cannot use your data for training the future models. And this is true if you're paying for a software. If you're paying for AI, that's going to be true. That's going to be part of your contract. If you're not paying, if you're using the free version, you are becoming the data for the next model. Anything that you put in the free tool is completely fair game to be used in the training of the future models. I mean, that's just what you said. That's basically how they are getting, the new ideas, and that's how they are getting the data for the future training, because all of us from time to time might be using the free models. I mean, nowadays, if you use Google search, when you are putting stuff in there, there's Gemini automatically, but that's the free version. So anything that you put in there is going to get stored and to somewhat extent might end up somewhere. So I would say to the organization, assume everybody's using AI, everybody wants to use AI, and the quicker you are to enabling something, some simple scenario, just give them internal AI search, like Gemini Enterprise, for example, that can access their OneDrive, and they can ask in the OneDrive, they can access that Google Drive or OneDrive, it works cross-platform, doesn't matter. It's already going to give them something that's internal, that's controllable, and that can be a start. Or if you are a Microsoft-oriented organization and you have M365, give them Copilot, at least Copilot Chat, which is a free version under your control, so that they can start to feel something and then it's going to stay under the control. So then that's your sandbox. Your engineers in the background can see who does what, which prompts people are using, for what they are using that Copilot or Gemini. And that can give you an idea what would be some of the next projects that you can figure out. Second thing, out of those people who are using AI, find your champions. Find the people who know what they are doing, because they are going to become the promoters. They can become the leaders of that internal enablement, because all of this exercise is about change management. So we are changing the way that we are working, so somebody needs to lead that change. That's the process of change management. And third thing is, it's a mixed strategy. It's not just bottom up, it's not just top down. You have to meet in the middle. So employees, especially those champs, are going to be the ones who are going to be telling you what kind of scenarios are really cool for them to use AI for. And then you as a management need to take those scenarios and create governance procedures out of them so that you can control that expansion of artificial intelligence inside of your organization.
Thanks for the answer. One thing that I want to ask you is that, what would be the department that can be most affected by AI? Which one of them that can be most benefit from this?
I mean, there are, again, I don't like calling departments low-hanging fruit, but that's basically the term that I'm going to use here. There are things that are already quite impacted. I will start from something like, for example, data science or data analytics departments. They used to need to write all those SQL queries or Python commands or something like that to do the analysis and create reports. Nowadays, in things like BigQuery, for example, we can use AI assistant that can we just write, okay, I need a report for the total revenue for the last 10 months divided by all my products. And then suddenly Gemini generates this wonderful SQL query that all goes in the background, gets you the data, and you're done. Suddenly, something that might require you a couple of minutes to a couple of maybe hours in some situations, it's done in just a couple of prompts, a couple of seconds, and you get your data back. So also like data cleansing, formatting, creating test data. You know, we in IT, sometimes when we are testing something, we need data formatted in a certain way. So it's a table of imagined data. You know, example that try to imagine that you're trying to build a report that's going to show that revenue, but it's a fake. You need fake data. So you need fake data from all the capitals of all the states in USA. So you don't know where that is. You maybe know 10 or 15 capitals. You probably don't know all of them. Suddenly you can ask Gemini, I need a table, all the states, all the capitals, and imagine the true data about the population, but imagine data about the sales of that product there. AI easily creates that in a matter of seconds, and you have your test data. We spend days on these kind of things to create a good test sample for something. So data science definitely affected. I think that end users in general, you know, any kind of productivity worker, as we call it, or information worker, anybody who writes emails or writes documents or something like that, whether it's from sales or from marketing, is already affected in terms of that business productivity. The way that we are writing emails has changed once and for all, and that's how it is. I think that majority of the emails, unless the short ones that we are receiving, are probably AI generated or at least AI assisted. So information workers in general are already affected. But that's not a department, that's kind of in general. So the third part is the customer support. And I think that that's done. Customer support is already AI powered. I'm not saying that there are no actual customer support agents, the human beings in those organizations. Of course there are, but much more work is done by AI than ever before. So if you look, for example, like Amazon, which is the typical web shop we all use, I think a year ago, or even 6 months ago, when I ordered something and it didn't arrive, you know, Amazon Fresh and those groceries, sometimes they don't arrive. They bring them to the wrong building. So I live in New York City, so it's pretty obvious that you can pick and choose wrong building to deliver something. And it happens. 6 months ago, directly in the app, I was able to reach the actual agent that will help me resolve this issue. Nowadays, it's not that easy anymore. So you need to storm through all of these AI things. And most of the time, you're not even storming through that. They're resolving your issue just like that because they can understand the natural language. So I think customer support experiences have changed once and for all, and we are not getting back. There's going to be just more and more AI involved. I just hope it's a really good AI so that it can actually resolve my issues. I don't mind talking to AI if I will get the answer that I'm looking for. My problem is that previous AIs, whatever we were using in workflow automation or automating those customer support processes, was not working. So we were all just waiting, come on, get me an agent, so I get me an actual human being, so I can actually get the answer. But nowadays it's becoming better and better. And I'll save the one that I think is personally most affected. I would say all of the others combined, and that's software development department. I think software development is affected the most due to the fact that developers were waiting for this. But not just developers, and customers were waiting for this because they suddenly wanted to influence. Software is eating the world. So basically software is the most important thing we do up until now. AI agents, which are all, again, software. So every company was becoming a software company. That means developers were kings. They could actually control absolutely everything in the whole production process. So if you get a good developer who was fast, you would get better time to market. If you get developers who weren't that quick or the process didn't work, you would get slower time to market. With the AI, every single developer is becoming much faster. So there's really no reason nowadays to have a developer who's not going to use AI. And nobody tolerates that anymore. every single organization that we are touching, every single organization that we are starting to work with, their first, if they have a development department, is like, oh, we need to teach those developers to use AI. We want them to use AI because they're so much faster. What is the actual productivity gain out of it? That's something that's to somewhat extent questionable, because developers are going to tell you that they're completing tasks in 50% less time than before, which is a huge improvement. But the overall productivity has not increased more than 10%. So technically speaking, how we are approaching this topic and how much we are actually getting out of AI, that's another story, but we are definitely getting something. But software development departments have been changed once and for all, and I don't think that there's going to be a developer who's not going to be using AI. Which AI is it going to be? Are the developers going to code and AI is going to complete their code, or they're going to vibe code it? That's another term, basically just writing the prompt and you get the whole app out of it. So you would probably be a great vibe coder because you understand the process, but you're not a developer. So you could just write prompts and you could get an app. So how is it going to look like in a half a year or a year? We're going to see it, but there's definitely no software development without AI anymore. That war is over.
So we can definitely say that agentic AI is not a trend for now. If you don't follow this way, you're going to be out of this new world, right?
Yeah, that's now the kind of a scary thought. So if for whatever reason you now stop and you don't learn any new tech, you don't follow any new tech for the next 6 months to a year, the world in which you're going to wake up after a year is going to look completely different than the one you fell asleep at. So that's the scary thought about it, because we have to be aware of everything that's happening. To answer your question, whether agentic AI is a trend or not, I mean, AI in itself is not a trend. Whether it's going to be called generative AI or agentic AI, or soon, I'm expecting any day now that we're going to have another term that we are using, because even agentic is, just so last year. So, but the terminology doesn't really matter. We can see the improvements that AI is doing on our lives, and that's not going away. Anytime you get the improvement, that never went away. So look at us now. We are recording a podcast. You're sitting somewhere in Brazil. I'm sitting in your city. So we are recording a podcast over internet. Can you imagine that in 2019, before COVID?
No, AI also has been helping a lot of companies on this remote environment too.
That's the main thing. So when we entered the COVID, everybody was, shocked. I mean, it was a shocking time. I'm not going to go into that. But we started working from home. Okay, some of us, from time to time, are returning back to the office. Some of us are not going to the office at all. So we now are in the hybrid world, but the remote work didn't go away just because COVID went away. We are stuck with it due to the fact that it's the technology that we now have that now works. We changed those rules and we proved the point that it can be done. I don't like the term remote work or work from home. I like term work from anywhere. Yeah, that's one thing that I think that we are still researching, because now more expensive models are actually giving you better results and quicker results. Now, the question is, sometimes you might not need a quicker result. Sometimes you will start the process and let the agent work overnight. You don't care if you're going to pay less for it. So it's a wild world how this whole thing is going to end up at the end of the day. There are so many scenarios. There are so many interesting things. I heard there's a startup here, financial startup, obviously in New York City, whatever it's going to be. So they're building financial reports. And you know how when we are presenting these agents, to the customers that can do certain kinds of financial reporting, those are usually examples that are completed within 10 to 15 minutes. So those are simple reports. But what if you want the pure analysis of some market that would be done like EY or PwC or Deloitte or I don't know, some of the other ones out there. So that's usually something that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there's like 10 consultants working on that for a week, 2, 3. So what a startup is actually doing, they're claiming that they're able to create that report with the AI in 2 days. So you would say, so agent is running for 2 days? Yeah, agents are running for 2 days. So that's, how many tokens does it spend? Thousands of dollars? Probably. But if the actual work done by a human consultants would take weeks and spend $300,000, then $3,000 for tokens, is not really that
It's
big of a
nothing.
deal.
Yeah.
And that's a wild economy that's gonna and all the changes that this is gonna drive, it's gonna be wonderful to see. And it's coming really, really soon. So we're not talking about decades or even years. Probably next year we're gonna see that deeper implementation of AI with more expensive tokens, longer running processes who are actually replacing these big chunks of jobs that we had to do our own before. How that is going to affect the big consultants, I don't know. They're all our customers, so we're going to be there to help them.
That's super interesting. And if you're part of a department, how do you know which technology to implement, and how do you know if you're like AI ready or not?
So the question is whether or not an end user would ask whether or not I'm AI ready. Probably not. But I get your point. How would you get into discussion when you need to develop the governance practices? So I would say that certain things are, I would say, housekeeping and common knowledge to anything that is IT related for the last couple of years. So, for example, can people access your computer without you? That would be first problem. If they
First
can,
thing, yeah.
you're already in trouble, no matter whether or not you switch AI on. Second thing is, do people have access only to the documents that they need to see, or can they access anything? If the answer is they can access absolutely anything, then keep in mind that AI will also be able to access anything. So that's some housekeeping inside of SharePoint or Google Drive that you need to actually do. Because you cannot imagine when you switch on Copilot or Gemini or whichever one on top of your enterprise data, how soon people can actually get started to get access to the content that you thought is out of their security boundary. Because previously, let's take Microsoft, for example, because that's the most recent one I've seen. So people were creating SharePoint sites. And due to the fact that there was no way to search for that site, it was secure. So we had published all of the paychecks from all of the employees there, some gifts that CEO is giving away for Christmas or New Year's or whatever. So all of that was in the management SharePoint because nobody knows where it is. How can they access it? And then suddenly you switch the Copilot on and ask, what is my CEO's paycheck? And you expect it to answer some, completely hallucinated work. It not just answers the question correctly, it references the document with the payroll.
Wow.
It happened not once, due to the fact that organizations are not aware that people have access to the stuff. So majority of the AI ready stuff that you need to do, it has to do with your internal data. So if you get that data under control, again, Microsoft, Google, doesn't really matter where it's stored. If you get it under control with the tools that they use, with the tools that they provide, Microsoft provides Purview that can actually help you alongside all of that, then you can actually be calm with switching on Copilot or something like that. There are other ways of doing that. So we implemented many different Copilot implementations where we would switch on search, switch off search, for example. So you can use Copilot to complete, but you cannot search through anything else that are not your documents. So that way, I and my agent can access the documents only that I actually created. So I cannot search through SharePoint because who knows what's there. My drive is there, my OneDrive is there, I'm happy with that, and I can start using Copilot. So it's again, don't wait your whole year until you get your data right. Just focus on what you need and focus on the small things that you can control while you are getting that data right. So it's always going to be about setting up the boundaries for human beings, because if you do that correctly, they're going to be applicable for the agents also.
Really interesting. Fastlane can help those organizations to actually be adapted to this new word, right? So help me tell these beautiful people how we can help them every day from now on.
There's a ton of consulting work that Fastlane does in the change management area. Change management is about two things. One is about the process, how you're going to handle the process, how you're going to onboard those champs, and then how you're going to transfer the knowledge through the champs to the end users. And we do all sorts of things on that area. I always like to divide the AI upskilling or AI education into two separate piles. One is for engineers, the second one bigger chunk is for end users. So what we do for end users, we are actually partnering with all major AI vendors. So whether it's Google, whether it's Anthropic, whether it's Microsoft, we got you covered. There's a ton of official courses that those vendors provide. So we teach all of them. And those are your entry points into the AI world for the end users. And then we have a set of our own workshops, a set of our own AI augmented workshops, as we call them, which are again based on those same end user AI platforms, where users can learn about personal productivity, how to start using Copilot, for example, in Outlook, Word, Excel, those personal tools, or on the other hand, the Google world, how to use Gemini in Google Docs, Sheets, Slides, or similar tools. Then we move on to the something like business meetings, how you operate things like Teams with the power of Copilot, or for example, Google Meet with the power of Gemini, and how that all integrates into the story. Then we talk about project management practices with the power of AI. So we teach AI for project managers, again, an end user course. So that there are many of those, which are, some of them are generic, so anybody can be, it can be applicable for absolutely anyone's job, like personal productivity, for example. And some of them are specific, like for finance people, for project managers, for, I don't know, product managers, or for marketeers, depending on what you are doing. We got you covered. And that's an end user hands-on education. What it means, you take your actual laptop, you work together with the instructor to get your actual knowledge. The instructor is going to show you the exercise, then you repeat the exercise. Then we move on to the next one. And that's rooted in the way that we feel is the best way for end users to learn. And we have really good examples of many different companies that are working together with us already, with really good trainers that are equipped with the knowledge how to teach end users. So that got your end users covered, which is vast majority of the people that you have in your organization. If we are talking about engineers, we are approaching it from the point how engineers learn. And engineers don't learn by listening. They don't learn by copy and pasting. Engineers learn by doing. So what it means,
Hands-on.
obviously hands-on, but engineers need a little bit of info so that they understand the concept, but immediately after that, they want to try it out. So what we do, we obviously, again, there are a couple of official courses that we teach from Microsoft, Google, Anthropic, Amazon, whichever ones, but we like our hackathon-based approach. So we designed this process of learning hackathons, which have the idea to get engineers in place where they usually are, in the environment where they like to be, to actually learn. So, for example, I will give just one little example for building the agents. Not the end user one, but more complex one that need to be coded. So we want to build a journalistic system. So something that's going to help journalists write their articles from top to bottom. So engineers, to do that, will need to learn how to use some kind of agentic framework. Google, Microsoft, Amazon, again, you name it. So what we do, we put them in a team. So there's a team of 4 to 6 people. They're going to be working together. They have a problem. The problem is we are building this system that should help journalists. So from start, brainstorming the topic of the article, writing that article, generating or searching for images in that article, proofreading that article, approving every paragraph of it, and then pushing it to some place where it can be actually published, rewritten and published. So that's just an imagined scenario. So how do we do that in a hackathon? People are going to start working together, exploring how to build their first simple agent, anything that's going to reply them back. So we provide them with Google, Azure, Microsoft Azure, Amazon, whatever subscription. Give them access to those models, to those tools. We give them the description, what their task is, and we give them the definition of done. This is what you need to accomplish. And this is 5, 6 links to the documentation where everything you need to complete is actually described. And now you do it. There are no step-by-step instructions. There are not exact instructions where to click, what to copy, what to paste. You 6 are going to be working, the 6 of you are going to be working together to complete that challenge. And there's a coach hanging around, not giving you the answers, but looking and monitoring what you are doing. So in case you get stuck, it can unstuck you. It can actually unblock you so that you can continue to the next challenge. And that's how we do the challenge 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, depending on the hackathon. By the end of the 3-day hack, for example, some of them are 1 day, 2 day, 3 day. We don't have a 5-day hack, I think. So there are many of them out there, many different topics. But at the end of the hack, you know how to repeat what you did during the hack in your own working environment. And we are simulating the actual case because we are giving you access to the actual tools. So you're not faking it. It's not something that's just going to be a lab environment. It's an actual subscription or project or however it's called, AWS account, where you can deploy the agent, you can see it running. And it's going to be an actual code that you built that you can take with you and then use in your own environment.
That's amazing. Can you imagine? That's a really hands-on lab. One thing that I keep wondering also is, I know that I would say 90% of our environment is training, is learning, is skilling. But beyond training, what other services does Fastlane offer to help these companies to adopt AI successfully?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this already, even though it's education, a lot of it already goes into the world which we would find consulting to some extent. So Fastlane has something that we usually, I think we call it expert for hire. So those people can be actually deployed to the customer site and they can actually do some kind of actual work. To be honest, it's never going to be replacing the actual engineers who are doing the work, but they can work with them. So if you have a team that went through the education, let's say we went with the team through Agentic Hackathon, so they now know how to build a hack, but they're starting again from their scenario. They know how to build an agent, but they would still like some help along the way. So they would like their second MVP, second agent that they're building now with their own data and their own environment. Again, they would like to have somebody guiding them through that. So that's what our experts can do. If there are situations in which people are struggling with some different technologies, something that's completely new, our experts might come in and actually do the architectural review of the thing and provide certain recommendations in terms of the consulting form. Sometimes we do a couple of custom demos, prepare them. All right, guys, you want to go into that direction. We cannot do the work for you, but we will show you how to do it, in a custom demo scenario. So this is where you would apply this technology. So again, we can take Agentic example. So if people are trying to build their full-blown agent to automate the production workflow from top to bottom, where they have a couple of touch points. It can be a developer touch points or it can be something else in that current situation. So you will not write that for them because that would take maybe weeks to actually get done. But you can take one simple segment and say, okay, guys, in this particular segment, this is how you would write the instruction. This is the tools that we're going to connect to. This is, again, MVP. This is a simple example of an agent, but it works. It does the work. Now you can continue doing your work. So that's what our consultants do. Our consultants are our top trainers who are also doing the work in their other jobs.
Amazing. And finally, if our listeners could only remember one thing for this pilot episode, what would it be, and what would you want them to keep in mind from today on?
So there are some selfish things that I would like them to remember. That's subscribe to our podcast, like the podcast, so that we can spread this message around. So that's going to be really crucial for us. And I know Jess is going to mention that at the end of the podcast, of course, but I wanted to also put it there. But the most important part is, Currently, we are in the period where technology is growing, where there are new things coming in every day. And it's a really good opportunity for all of you if you're going to jump on this train today, because that actually means that you're going to get so much value while the rest of the world is still trying to figure out what to do with it. We are still in that place where, everybody's using AI, but not everybody implemented the processes. So now is your time to actually shine, to get the education for all of your people, to switch on those Copilot, Gemini, whichever technology, whichever licenses you want to choose, and start getting the value from the innovation. Because as it is with any innovation in the world, we start with the people who start early. So those are going to be early adopters who get the most of the value of innovation. And that as innovation becomes obligation, we are getting less and less value because suddenly we are forced. We cannot do it anymore. So for example, if there's an agency, let's say it's software development, just a brief example, software development agency that is using AI versus the one that is not using AI. these ones are going to be faster than these ones. So these ones are going to get more value out of the actual AI, and they're going to have more customers at the end of the day. Problem is that AI is also going to influence the pricing of the work for those developers. So probably customers are going to become aware that developers are quicker, so the projects shouldn't cost that much. Guess what happens? Then those people who are not using AI are going to need to adapt the pricing, and they are still going to be slower. So really tremendous change. Nothing like this has ever happened in the IT world. We have seen changes, but this is probably the biggest change since we've seen the PC come to the workplace. And that's something we need to be aware of. This is not going anywhere. So the sooner you start, the more value you're going to get. And we're definitely there for you. We have so many people around the globe, not just in the US, that can help you with those first steps with the AI today.
Thanks, Tom. I just want to tell you guys, if you want to learn a little bit more about all the fast lane environment, AI training, hackathons, everything we mentioned here, if you don't know where to start, you want to talk to us and see where we can help, you can go to www.fastlaneus.com. We're going to leave all the information here too. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast. We'll see you in the next episode.
Absolutely. See you out there.
Bye.